Okay, in this module, we're going to cover what the experts have to say about indoor air quality challenges. We'll talk about outside air, how Mother Nature addresses it, and then relate that to the indoor air quality environment. So, John, why don't you start with some of the quotes that we've learned about in our indoor air quality industry?
Well, there's a lot of experts that do say that we have some challenges out there. And the first one that we look at, it's a quote that comes to us from the EPA, or the Environmental Protection Agency. And what they say is that accumulated debris can restrict the airflow in the air ducts, making the system work harder to heat and cool the home. A buildup of 0.042 or 1/20th inches of dirt on the heating or cooling coil can result in a decrease in efficiency of 21%, increasing your monthly utility and fuel bills.
That's huge, or I should say that's small. We're talking about 1/20th of an inch.
Yeah, I mean, just think about that for a second, guys. 1/20th of an inch. The smallest reading we have on a typical ruler is 1/16th of an inch.
So it's smaller than that.
This is 1/20th. It's not very much dirt to have on there, and that's pretty common today when we open up our furnaces and air handlers.
Okay, and then Texas A&M did a study as well. They talked about the blower wheel and the buildup on there, and it says that a dirty blower wheel will reduce the airflow, in a study done by Texas A&M, by 1/8 of a buildup of dust on that blower wheel will reduce its ability to move air by 30%.
Well, and again, that's critical to the performance and the functionality of the equipment. If the airflow is choked off by as much as 30%, with today's higher performance motors, ECM motors, variable speed motors, even just the comfort level of the homeowner, how can we expect to dehumidify the home if we're slowing the airflow by as much as 30%? And the added cost that's going to put on the utilities as well. Mm-hmm. So there's going to be a lot of challenges with that, and it continues. There's a group called Adrian Environmental. They say that removing the dust from the blower and the air ducts can increase the airflow from the registers by up to 20%. Again, it's another huge number.
So it's important to clean the ducts, to keep the blower wheel clean. So there's things that we talk about when we talk to the homeowner about things that we can do for them. Mm-hmm. And that blower wheel in and of itself is engineered. It's designed by engineers to move a certain amount of air. And the curvature on that is not flat, and it's not crimped like that. It has a perfect curvature. So when we start building that up in there, it can't move the amount of air it's designed to move. So we got to keep that clean, as well as keeping the ducts clean.
Well, and then what's going to happen with that is once it's reduced that airflow, with the power company is now going to get more money out of that. How long are those mechanics of that motor going to function with all that dirt and debris in there?
That's one of the biggest challenges we have.
It's just simply not going to happen.
So, Global Initiative for Asthma. Now we're going to talk a little bit about, we mentioned how it affects the performance of the equipment. How does it affect the health of our families? So the Global Initiative for Asthma says the incidence of asthma has increased 50% in the past 10 years. Contributing factors include indoor air allergens and indoor air pollution. That's an unbelievable critical statement. 50%, it's a 50% increase. So we're looking at, like when we were kids, I never remembered kids carrying inhalers around and having to have the challenges they have today. Now we're finding, when I started coaching my kids in the sports, I had kids on my bench in hockey that had inhalers that just sitting right next to the water bottles.
Yeah, 50%.
And it's getting worse.
It's a huge number out there, and that continues. The United States Centers for Disease Control, or the CDC, they've got great information on their website. So if you ever want to check out some great information, go to the CDC site. But some of the things they say on there are going to follow, like the number of children under age 18 who have asthma has increased every year since 1985. In fact, asthma is now at epidemic proportions worldwide, especially among school-age children. That's a scary word right there, epidemic proportions. Right. If that doesn't tell you that there's a big problem out there today, I don't know what does.
Well, one of the things about this quote here is it says since 1985. And we just talked about the indoor air quality challenges starting in 1973. Why is this only the epidemic starting in 85?
Well, if you think about it, Steve, I mean, we started tightening our homes up and reducing that natural ventilation in the early 1970s when those codes changed. But how many homes were tight in 1973?
It took a while for the builders to catch up on new construction, as well as remodelers. When they remodel an old home, they take the lath and the plaster off on the siding and they re-insulate, or not re-insulate, they add insulation that wasn't there to begin with. They put Tyvek paper and plastic around, and they do the same things we do in new construction today. So now that's why we're getting all these elevated levels of pollution in the indoor air environment.
So those quotes continue. The American College of Allergists, they tell us that 50%, and I think this is an incredible quote, 50% of all illnesses are either caused by or aggravated by polluted indoor air. So break that one down for a second.
Well, they're not talking about just asthma and allergies. They're saying of all ailments. So really, the only thing that can affect our bodies is what we eat, what we drink, and what we breathe. When we talk to environmental doctors, they say 70% of the time it's what we breathe. And that's kind of what this quote is leading to. 50% of all our illnesses that we have are contributed to the air that we breathe in our indoor air environment. So the United States Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, this is probably the most famous quote that you'll hear. We use it all the time. You see it in a lot of literature. It says that indoor air is 2 to 5 times and can be as much as 100 times worse than the worst polluted outside air. And that's because, here again, our homes are tight. Okay, it's not allowing it to breathe, and it's building up with all the different chemicals that we're using in building materials and carpets and paints and stains and the air fresheners and everything else we've been talking about. So those elevated levels are so much so that even testing the EPA's have been showing it as at elevated levels that are symptomatic and making people sick.
Well, again, it just continues to tell you that there's a big challenge out there. And the EPA goes on to say some other things as well. They say that health effects from indoor air pollutants may be experienced soon after exposure or even possibly years later.
Well, soon after means asthma and allergies, acute things that are happening right now.
Mm-hmm.
Years later can be, like you're probably going to
Heart disease, cancer, some of these more debilitating diseases. So there's things that are going on that are happening to our bodies now that we might not feel the effects from, but when we're older, it's probably going to be some pretty scary stuff out there.
So what the EPA is take that to another level is what they're saying is it's prudent to try to improve the indoor air quality in our home, even if symptoms are not noticeable. So even if you don't have asthma and allergies, what they're saying is it's important. It's kind of like taking vitamins. You don't take vitamins today because you have a headache or you got some kind of disease. You take it for preventing stuff from happening in the future. Mm-hmm. And it's the same thing with having the right air cleaners and an air handler. That is going to address things that could be now or could be things in the future as well.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting where the EPA says that it's prudent to try and do something about it if you can. The EPA is not part of the heating and cooling industry. They don't make heating and cooling equipment. They don't make indoor air quality equipment, but yet they endorse it. Not a particular manufacturer or a particular brand. They don't play any favorites, but they know that there's enough of a challenge, enough of an issue where they're saying, folks, if you can do something about it, it's the right thing to do.
Well, here's an agency that has no skin in the game, but they're saying that you should be doing these things. So Harvard University, and this is probably one of my favorite studies that have been done on indoor air quality, they took 120 homes on Cape Cod in Massachusetts, and what they were doing was testing for 89 different cancer-causing chemicals that are in the home from household products, household cleaning chemicals, pesticides, stuff that we use in our indoor air environment every day.
Now, why were they testing for those 89 chemicals? Is there an increase in something that they're seeing?
Yeah, it was cancer. They were looking at causes of cancer. So these were carcinogenics that are in the air, and so they were wondering, well, we'd spend 90% of our times indoors, so what level of those carcinogenics are there? So they earmarked 89 chemicals that are from household products or building materials, or the things we've been talking about. Out of the 120 homes, 100% of them, every single one of them, had toxic compounds at levels that were symptomatic. They had 25 VOCs, volatile organic compounds, or more in every home that they tested. And here again, at levels that were causing people symptoms, making them sick. Now, they weren't dropping dead, but it was aggravating asthmas, allergies, headaches, skin rashes, dizziness, all these things we're talking about. They were at those levels, and they said that this is a nationwide problem. It's not just, if we test one neighborhood and it has 120 of the homes, all of them, 100% of them, had the same challenge. They're saying this is a nationwide problem.
Right. Well, it's because all houses are being built the same way. We're using the same materials. We're building by the same codes out there for the most part. We're using the same cleaning chemicals, the same pesticides. Everything's the same. It's whether you're in California or Florida or in Canada. We're all doing it the same. Most products that are being used in the average household, everybody's using them. So it is a nationwide problem.
So what's all the fuss about? We got all these particles, germs, and gases, and that's basically what the fuss is about. If you look at pie charts put out by Centers for Disease Control, they always talk about the 3 phases of contamination. Now, we could spend 3 modules on this, one on each phase of contamination. And we got the particles, we got the germs, and we got the gases. All of these are equally responsible for causing allergic reactions, asthmatic attacks, and other challenges that we have.
As well as the premature breakdowns and the inefficiencies of the equipment. All of those things cause those major challenges for us, and that's what we're focusing on today. But before we go indoors anymore, let's talk about what's in the outdoor air environment for a minute here. We do have some pollutants that are outside. What are some of the pollutants that we have in our outdoor air environment?
Well, you have, like where I'm from in Chicago, 10, 12 times a year we'll have what's called a pollution alert day. They'll have a day where it's so bad outside, they're telling people if you have asthma and allergies or breathing problems, don't go outside. Then a couple days later, we'll have it on the newscast. We'll say, hey, everything's okay again. So we're, like you said, we're polluting the air. We got cars, we got natural things like volcanoes, we got forest fires.
I know we've just had one of the worst pollen seasons in my area in a
Pollen,
long
yeah.
time. There's tree pollen and weed pollen and grass pollen, all sorts of things.
Yeah, factories putting stuff in the air. So we're continually polluting the air, but Mother Nature has a way of controlling that. So how does outside air get cleaned? I think that's the key. When you understand how outside air gets cleaned, we can take that information and relate it to our indoor air environment. Because outside we have these things we've been talking about, the three phases of contamination. We have particles, germs, and gases. Each one of those are equally responsible for causing these ailments, and they're controlled outside, for the lack of a better term, they're controlled by a different technology. Particles are controlled by ionization, germs are controlled by UVC energy, and the gases are controlled by ozone. Lightning and UV and the UVB rays from the sun help control the ozone. So why don't you kind of cover ionization for our folks here?
Well, ionization really starts, for controlling the particles, the ionization process starts with what we call action days. And action days are really any days where we're having weather type events outdoors, whether it's a lot of sun, whether it's a lot of wind, rain, fronts moving through. When we get those action days, ions are created in our environment, and ions help to control those particles. Particles always have a positive and a negative charge to them, and so do ions. They're also going to have a positive and a negative charge. And when those ions are created during those action days, they start to join together with the particles, and opposites simply attract. Positive particles join together with negative ions, and negative particles join together with positive ions. And as those things start to join together, they just get heavier. They cluster as a group, and the heavier the particle becomes, the easier it is for gravity to simply pull it out of that environment. So we've all seen this in action before in different areas that we live in, where some days are just really clear. You can see farther off into the distance. It might be mountain peaks or over the water that you're looking at. But then other days, you just can't see very far at all. But then a front comes through, and then suddenly you can see those mountain peaks again in the distance.
Something happens with ionization to settle all that stuff out of the air.
Yeah, but it's settling those things out of the environment. So it's a natural process. It's a scientifically proven way that Mother Nature uses. Like you say, it's a technology that Mother Nature has to control those outdoor particles.
But that ionization doesn't have much of an effect on germs. So there's a second technology that Mother Nature uses. It's called UVC energy. So ultraviolet energy from the sun is divided up into different segments. There's UVA, UVB, UVC, and UVV. Now there's gamma rays and X-rays on either end of that spectrum, but for the ultraviolet energy spectrum, that's what we deal with on a daily basis. UVA and B, that gets through the stratosphere, the ozone layer, and a lot of it gets down here to where we live, gives us a skin tan, helps our body produce vitamin D. UVC is a very dangerous wavelength of light. Without the stratosphere and the ozone layer filtering it out, we would burn up. But a little of it gets down here, enough to control the germs. Just like you see moss growing out of one side of the tree. It doesn't grow on the shady side, because the UVC energy is always constantly beating on it and eating it up and killing it. Same thing happens in our indoor environment if we use the right products to make that happen.
Well, the next thing that happens out there is we still have that gas phase contaminants, the different types of chemicals and VOCs that we have in our environment. And those are controlled through another type of energy that we get from the sun, which is that UVV energy that you mentioned. It's another type of ultraviolet energy, but it's more commonly referred to as ozone. And we also get ozone that occurs when we get lightning strikes that occur during thunderstorms. And I think everybody's probably experienced that before, where when you've gone outside after a storm where there's been a lot of thunder and a lot of lightning associated with that, it just kind of smells cleaner and smells fresher. And usually everybody attaches a term to that. They say it smells like a fresh, clean spring rain.
Right.
And that's really, it's not necessarily the ozone that we're smelling. It's the lack of odors in the air. It's actually
lack of smell. That's what I always say.
Yeah, the lack of smell. It's clean air that we have in our environment. So it's another nice process or technology that Mother Nature uses to control those things. So we don't get a lot of ozone, but we do have some that's naturally present every day to help us with that outdoor air pollution issue.
So to summarize, we've got particles, germs, and gases in the air. Remember, the particles are positively and negatively charged, and that's why ions work. Ions are positive and negatively charged. It's basically like magnets if you picture paper clips in the air and Mother Nature throws a bunch of magnets in the air and you're just grabbing all these paper clips, they're down. They get enough weight, they settle out of the air. The UVC energy from the sun controls the germs. So now we've got sterilization going on. We've got a safer, healthier environment. And the last thing that's left is the gases. Lightning and UVB energy from the sun control the gases that are in the air.
Well, and then therein lies the challenge, Steve, is we now have these, we know there's some great things that are going on outside to help clean that air that we're breathing outdoors, but we spend 90% of our time living in these tighter homes, these more energy efficient homes today, in this chemical soup. And we've talked about all the challenges with that chemical soup that are just being held inside of these homes that are just, they're constructed with that tieback that's wrapping around the home. We have insulation in our walls and in our
Presswood,
ceilings
particle
today.
wood, paints and stains.
Yeah, the different types of windows and caulking and sealants around those windows, all creating that chemical soup that we now live in today.
Right. So we have these nice, beautiful homes we're building, and we're doing a really good job conserving energy, but now we created another problem. Now, with that problem and that challenge, it creates a market for us. So, but before we get into the marketing and the product itself, the next module we're going to cover is how this indoor air quality, this elevated levels, has an effect on our bodies.
So, yeah, how they're actually affecting us and why we're feeling the effects of those things in our home.
That's right.